The weight of the word failure, the room was full, but it felt cold. Keanu Reeves sat at the far end of the long glass table, hands folded, eyes calm, but the lines on his face betrayed something deeper. Across from him sat studio executives, producers, agents. Some leaned forward with fake concern, others reclined with silent judgment. Someone finally spoke. "We ran the numbers again," the voice said, flat and corporate. The film underperformed. Massively. The critics didn't connect with it. Neither did the audience. And there was a pause, a cruel breath. "You, Keanu, were called outdated, emotionally dry, and unfit for the current market." Keanu blinked, slowly, no anger, no protest. Just silence. It's just that familiar calm that always lived in his eyes. Even when the world tried to drown him. "We're not moving forward with the next project," the same voice continued. "We're sorry." Another lie. No one in that room was sorry. Someone else added, "We might consider bringing in someone younger. Maybe Taylor, maybe Ryan. Someone with more heat." Another laugh. Keanu sat still, nodding once. But behind his stillness was a storm. He wasn't thinking about the money or the fame or the lost opportunity. He was thinking about the team he had promised to protect. The makeup artist who had cried on set because her son got bullied for her long hours. The stunt double who had taken a bad fall but came back anyway. The sound guy who whispered to Keanu once, "You're the reason I started dreaming again." Had carried all of them, and now the room called him a failure. But he didn't flinch. Not in front of them. Ana de Armas sat near the back of the room. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't invited. But she had heard the whispers. She had seen the headlines. And she had known deep down that today wasn't just about a canceled project. It was about something deeper, something crueler. She watched Keanu from behind her sunglasses. He looked like a man trying to disappear 3 months earlier. They had shared a quiet moment on set. He had been resting between takes, legs stretched out on the cold studio floor. Watching the ceiling like it held answers, Anna had asked, "What are you thinking?" He had turned to her and smiled softly. How to make the quiet moments louder. She didn't understand then. She did now. A voice in the boardroom pierced her thoughts. "We'll send the paperwork by tomorrow," someone said. "Appreciate your time." Keanu stood. Anna watched closely. The weight he carried on his shoulders seemed heavier now. Not because of pride, but because he refused to place it on anyone else. As he turned to leave, a voice interrupted again. "Maybe it's time to accept it's over." That's when Anna stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't yell. She didn't say anything grand or loud. She simply walked to Keanu, took his hand gently, and looked around the room. Her eyes, clear, sharp. Unflinching, spoke louder than words ever could. Silence. The entire room froze. No one had expected her to do that. No one had seen it coming. She had risked her future, her reputation, her upcoming projects, but she didn't care. Her quiet act of kindness cut through every sneer, every number, every insult. She stood beside Keanu, and in that moment, the room once filled with voices that laughed too easily and judged too quickly, was completely silent. Later, as they walked outside, Anna finally spoke. "You're not a failure. You just don't play by their rules." Keanu looked at her, the corner of his lip lifting slightly. "Thank you," Anna smiled. "Don't thank me yet. I have a plan." He raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" She laughed. "Only if you're afraid of making them regret everything." The rain began to fall softly around them, but neither of them moved. Under the gray sky, the two of them stood, an actor they had tried to erase and a woman who refused to let him fade. It was only the beginning. Whispers behind closed doors. Sana sat across from Keanu in a small coffee shop tucked into a quiet corner of the city. The rain from earlier had turned into a steady drizzle, soft against the windows. Outside, people walked by with umbrellas, unaware that inside, two people were planning something much bigger than anyone expected. "I've been thinking about what you said," Anna said, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup. "You always talk about lifting others, building something real, not just another blockbuster." Keanu looked up, curious. "It's all I ever wanted." She nodded. So let's do that. On our terms? What are you suggesting? Yana leaned forward, lowering her voice. They may have power, but we have truth. We have stories, real ones, about pain, hope, love, loss, about people no one notices anymore. Keanu studied her face. She wasn't speaking as a star. She was speaking as a human being who had seen too much, felt too deeply, and had reached a breaking point with the industry's coldness. You want to make something independent? He asked. She smiled. Not just independent, unstoppable. Word spread quickly in Hollywood. Ana de Armas and Keanu Reeves were reportedly working on something. No studio was attached. No manager confirmed it. But everyone whispered about it. Agents grew nervous. Execs called meetings. And some tabloids claimed Anna had lost her mind. But none of that mattered to her. She and Keanu had already started. They rented a modest space in a forgotten part of the city. It used to be a warehouse. Now it was filled with mismatched chairs, faded rugs, old lights, and walls covered in handwritten notes. Anna pinned a new note to the board. We tell stories that matter. We tell stories with heart. Keanu walked in holding 2 coffees. The guy downstairs thinks we're opening a bookstore. Honestly, Anna said, grinning, that wouldn't be a bad backup plan. They laughed. Not the forced kind. Real kind that came from remembering what it meant to feel human again. They held auditions. It's not for fame, but for truth. People came in single moms, aging actors, hopeful dreamers, war veterans who never thought they'd be on screen. No agent. No glam team. Just people who had lived hard lives and carried heavy stories. Anna listened to each one with care. Keanu watched from the back, quietly nodding, learning, understanding. One day an older man walked in. He had deep scars on his face and a limp. In his step, he said nothing at first. Just sat in the chair, looking around nervously. Anna asked gently, "What's your story?" He didn't answer right away. Then he whispered, "I used to act, back when it meant something. Then I lost everything. Now I'm just trying to feel again." Anna glanced at Keanu. Keanu stood up and walked over to the man, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Then you've already done more than most." They cast him that day. Not for pity, but because he carried something real. As days turned into weeks, their project began to take shape. It wasn't just a film. It was a movement. Every scene was built from truth. Every line of dialogue came from someone's real experience. The crew was made up of people who had been told they weren't good enough. The actors were faces Hollywood had forgotten, but none of them felt forgotten here. One night, Keanu stayed late, reviewing footage. Anna walked in with a blanket and 2 steaming cups of tea. "You should sleep," she said, placing 1 cup beside him. He nodded. "I will." But he didn't. He watched a scene again, one where a young girl told her father. She didn't want to be invisible anymore. Her voice cracked with so much pain, felt like a knife through silence. Anna sat beside him, quiet for a moment. "You know what this feels like?" She asked. Keanu shook his head, like we're finally breathing. He looked at her, eyes soft. "Maybe we are." The day they wrapped filming, there were no paparazzi, no interviews, no headlines, just a room full of people clapping for each other, hugging, crying, thanking one another for being seen. Anna stood in the center. "You all gave this more than talent," she said. "You gave it heart, and that's what no one can take from us," Keanu added quietly. "We didn't make a film. We made a mirror, the world to look into." Someone whispered, "What happens next?" Anna smiled. "We show them." But as they prepared to release the trailer online, something unexpected happened. A leak, someone possibly from the old Studio Circle got hold of an early version and uploaded it without permission. Within hours, it exploded online. Keanu Reeves. Raw, vulnerable, not a hero, not a killer, just ... human. Ana de Armas. Not polished. Not perfect, just real. Audiences wept. They commented things like, I haven't cried like this in years, and this saved me tonight. The same industry that had called Keanu a failure now watched in silence because something had changed. The world was listening, and they weren't ready for what came next. The trailer that broke the silence that morning after the trailer leaked. Keanu sat alone on the rooftop of their modest studio building. The sun had just begun to rise, soft and hesitant. Like it, too, was unsure what kind of day it would be. He held a steaming cup of black coffee, worn hands wrapped around it tightly, as if the warmth could anchor him. He hadn't slept. His phone buzzed on the small table beside him again and again and again. Hundreds of missed messages, calls from unknown numbers. His name was trending. Not because of a scandal, not because of a viral meme, but because the world had finally seen a side of him that Hollywood had buried years ago. His truth. Anna opened the rooftop door, her eyes sleepy but shining. "You seen it yet?" she asked softly. Keanu shook his head. Just ... the comments. She sat beside him, her knees pulled close, like a child watching something fragile unfold. "Do you want to?" she asked. "Maybe later," he said. "It's strange. I never thought something this quiet could make so much noise." Anna smiled. "That's what makes it powerful." The trailer had reached 2 million views by mid-morning, but the numbers weren't what mattered. It was the reactions. People weren't just watching, they were feeling, crying, remembering things they had buried deep. Strangers shared stories about grief, about growing old, about being told they were useless, about losing everything but still waking up the next day. One comment read, "I don't know what this film is about yet, but it reminded me that I'm still human." Another said, "I saw my father in Keanu's eyes. He passed away last year. Thank you for this." And one more, "I haven't seen something this honest in decades." But not everyone was celebrating. Behind the glossy doors of the same studio that had called Keanu a failure, chaos erupted. "How did this happen?" Senior executive shouted. They had no backing, no campaign, no publicity. "And yet this thing's blowing up," someone mumbled. "They told a story people actually care about." The executive slammed the table. "Well, that's a problem, sir. If this works, we're going to have actors and artists thinking they don't need us." Keanu and Anna knew the backlash was coming. A smear article appeared. 2 days later, the headline read, "Are we being emotionally manipulated by actors desperate for relevance?" It tried to paint the film as overly sentimental, aimed at exploiting pain, and proof that even stars will beg for sympathy when their careers fade. Anna read it aloud in their office. Then she tossed the paper in the trash. "There." "Scared?" she said. Keanu gave a tired smile. "Let them be." Meanwhile, offers poured in. Independent theaters across Europe reached out, begging to host screenings. A streaming platform emailed, offering a quiet but respectful deal, no creative interference, full control, and global access. Anna looked at Keanu. "Should we?" He paused. "Only if they understand what this is. This isn't a comeback story, it's a mirror." They flew to New York quietly, no red carpet, no suits, just them, 2 backpacks, and a drive that hadn't been broken by fame or failure. They met with the platform's head of creative in a quiet corner cafe. She was younger than they expected, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, but her eyes burned with purpose. "I watched the trailer 3 times, she said. "I cried. I laughed. I called my father afterward. I want this." And I looked at Keanu. He nodded. "One condition," Anna said. "What?" "We control everything." "Done." The film was titled Quiet Hands, a story about an aging janitor who once dreamed of being a dancer, about a young woman who couldn't speak after surviving trauma, and how they both met in a forgotten theater and taught each other to heal. Keanu played the janitor. Anna played the young woman. The film didn't. Screamed, it whispered, but the world heard it anyway. The premiere was digital. No flashing lights, no grand speeches, just a black screen with white words. This story belongs to anyone who has ever been told they're not enough. Within 48 hours, was watched by over 20 million people. The studio executives who once laughed now watched in silence. The actors who had stayed quiet started reaching out. One message from a young actor read, "You made me believe." In acting again, another from an old director simply said, "Thank you for reminding me why I started." Keanu sat beside Anna that night in their quiet studio. The room was dimly lit. The crew had gone home. City outside buzzed, but inside, it was just stillness and peace. "Do you think it'll last?" he asked. Anna looked at him. "Maybe not," she said. "But it'll matter, and that's more than most get." He nodded, letting her words settle into him like warmth in winter. "You saved me," he said after a long pause. "No," she replied. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you how." I didn't say anything more that night, because some moments don't need words. They just need truth. The night the lights came back, messages kept coming. Emails, handwritten letters, voice recordings, videos from strangers across the world. People who had never heard their stories told on a screen. People who had forgotten how to feel seen. One video, a single mother in Brazil said through tears, "I watched Quiet Hands alone after putting my kids to sleep. I didn't think anyone understood what it's like to feel invisible. But now, I don't feel alone anymore." Keanu watched that video 3 times in silence. Anna sat beside him each time, her hand gently resting on his. "This is what they called failure," she whispered. Keanu closed his eyes. A week later, something unexpected happened. A legendary film. Festival One that had rejected their project in the early days publicly reached out. The invitation was simple. We were wrong. We would be honored to screen Quiet Hands as our centerpiece film. Keanu read the message twice. He looked at Anna. "What do you think?" Anna smiled gently. "Let's go." Not to prove anything, just ... to show up for the ones who still need to see it. They arrived in Europe quietly. The red carpet was offered. They declined. Instead, they walked in through a side door, dressed in simple black.
No.
Press, no interviews. Just intention. The theater was packed, but it wasn't filled with celebrities or critics. It was filled with real people, caregivers, musicians, veterans, dreamers, survivors, people who had seen the trailer and traveled across countries just to feel something real as the lights dimmed. Keanu felt his heart beat harder than it had in years. Not because he was nervous, but because this was bigger than him. This wasn't about a movie anymore. This was about healing. The film began 90-3 minutes. Not a single explosion, no CGI. No dramatic scores, just quiet scenes. An old man sweeping a dusty stage in silence. A young woman sitting in a dark corner, slowly moving her fingers in rhythm, remembering something she hadn't dared to feel in years. Small glances, trembling hands, whispered apologies. By the time the final scene faded to black, the silence in the room was deafening, and then one person clapped, then another, and then the whole room stood. Not cheering, not shouting, but applauding in a slow, respectful rhythm. Like they were saying thank you without words. Keanu blinked hard. Anna wiped her cheeks. Silently, they didn't take the stage. They didn't need to. The story had spoken outside the theater. A journalist caught up to them. "Keanu," she asked, breathless, "how does it feel to be the man who made Hollywood look in the mirror?" Keanu paused, then answered quietly, "I didn't make anyone look. I just stopped hiding," Anna added. "We told the truth. That's all. And sometimes the truth is enough." The headlines changed overnight. Keanu Reeves is back and more human than ever. I know the Armas breaks Hollywood's silence with grace and fire. Quiet Hands reminds us why we ever loved film in the first place. And then came something no one expected. The Academy called, an official reached out. Humbly, quietly, we'd like to consider Quiet Hands for award recognition. It's rare to see something so honest. Keanu didn't react. Anna smiled, but not with excitement, more, with a kind of peaceful sadness. "We didn't do this for awards," she said. "Did it because it needed to be done." But she also knew what that meant. If they accepted, it meant re-entering the system they had. Walked away from Dot. If they declined, it meant losing a bigger platform. So they asked themselves, What mattered more? The spotlight, or the light they were already creating? Later that night, in their little studio, they sat in the dark. The only light coming from a flickering lamp by the window. Keanu looked over at Anna. "Do you regret anything?" She shook her head. "Not a single thing. Even when they tried to erase us. Especially then." He smiled faintly. She leaned back, arms crossed behind her head. "I think the world's ready now. Ready for something different. Ready to be reminded that kindness, humility, resilience, they still matter." "We didn't just make a movie," Keanu said slowly. "We lit a fire." Anna nodded. "We're just getting started." Somewhere across the world, a young artist watched Quiet Hands from his tiny apartment and began to sketch again, for the first time in years. A retired teacher pressed play and felt her breath catch, realizing she still mattered. A teenager showed it to her mother and said, "This is how I feel inside." And in a quiet hospital room, an old man in a wheelchair whispered, "Thank you," to a screen he couldn't touch. The film kept playing, and the lights once dimmed by the noise of the world slowly began to come back on. The night the industry blinked, its morning sun spilled through the old studio windows, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. The room was quiet, but not empty. Keanu sat cross-legged in the center, reviewing old notes while Anna leaned against the far wall, flipping through a stack of fan letters that had arrived overnight. She read one out loud. "Dear Keanu and Anna, watch Quiet Hands with my grandfather. He never speaks much. He's a war vet, quiet and strong. But when the film ended, he cried for the first time in my life. He said, 'I felt seen.' Thank you, Eli, 17 years old." Anna folded the paper carefully and set it beside the others. "This," she whispered, "this is everything." Keanu nodded without looking up. "We didn't just tell a story. We built a bridge." The world was changing faster than either of them expected. Film schools began including Quiet Hands in their curriculum. Classrooms discussed scenes about silence and presence. It's about how truth didn't need a loud voice to be heard. Big-name directors who had once mocked low-budget emotional pieces now referenced Keanu and Anna's work as visionary. One popular late-night host, during a live segment, said, "Something shifted when a film without car chases, explosions, or superheroes becomes the most talked-about piece of cinema this year." Quiet Hands didn't entertain us. It healed us. The applause lasted a full minute. Keanu watched the clip once, then turned it off. "We're not finished," he said. Anna smiled. "No, we're not." But in the shadows of celebration, something darker began to stir. Studio executives, producers, and powerful voices who once ruled the industry by gatekeeping were beginning to lose their grip. And they didn't like it. Calls came in. Meetings were offered, invitations. From massive studios with promises of complete creative freedom and generous compensation packages. Keanu and Anna said no to every one, until one call felt different, Woman named Maya, head of a struggling, near-bankrupt independent studio, eached out. She didn't promise fame or money. Instead, she said, "You reminded me why I fell in love with storytelling. I've got nothing but a skeleton crew and some dusty lights. But if you have another story, we'll build it with you." Anna called her back that night. Maya's studio sat on the edge of a small coastal town, far from Los Angeles, far from noise. It had peeling paint, flickering lights, and broken chairs. But it also had warmth. In honesty, Keanu walked through the entrance and breathed in the smell of old wood and salt water. "Feels alive," he said. Anna nodded. "Let's bring it back." They gathered a new team. This time, not just actors, but poets, nurses, school teachers, musicians who had never performed outside their hometowns. They weren't professionals, but they were real. Keanu met a bus driver named Tomas, who shared a story about losing his wife. He wept as he spoke. Anna hugged him without a word and wrote a role for him that same night. The next film was titled The Wind Never Lies. It followed the story of a grieving widower and a mute violinist who crossed paths in a storm. It was about regret, forgiveness, and learning to live again after unbearable loss. On the first day of filming, rain poured relentlessly. Equipment got soaked. The crew shivered. Some questioned whether to reschedule. Keanu looked at the sky, then turned to the team and said, "Let's shoot it." Grief doesn't wait for the weather to be perfect. They filmed the opening scene with trembling hands and soaked clothes, and it was perfect. Meanwhile, the Academy announced the nominations. Quiet Hands had been nominated for 6 awards, including Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Actor for Keanu Reeves. The announcement shook the industry. The man they once mocked as too old, too quiet and irrelevant, was now standing at the peak of his craft, not because he played a hero, but because he had dared to be vulnerable. But Keanu didn't react when Anna told him. Simply said, "It's not about the gold, it's about the people." The night of the awards arrived. They almost didn't attend, but then Anna said, "We need to be seen not for ourselves, but for everyone we represent." So they went. No stylists, no brand deals. Anna wore a simple black dress her mother had sewn by hand. Keanu wore the same suit he'd worn 5 years ago at a friend's wedding. When they walked into the ceremony, the crowd turned to look, but no one laughed. This time they rose. People clapped not just because of a film, but because of what they stood for. Because they reminded the world that failure isn't falling, it's forgetting who you are after the fall. When the winner for Best Actor was announced, there was a pause in the room. And the award goes to Keanu Reeves, Quiet Hands. The applause was thunderous. Keanu walked to the stage, slow and steady. He held the statue gently, like it might break in his hands. Then he looked at the crowd and said only one thing. "This belongs to anyone who was told their silence didn't matter." And then he stepped back. No speech, no drama, just truth. Anna stood in the front row, her eyes shining. She knew what came next, because while the world was watching him stand on a stage, he was already planning how to lift someone else. The final from Myth next morning, Keanu stood on the edge of a quiet beach near the coastal studio. Waves rolled in, gentle and steady. His bare feet pressed into the cold sand. The wind moved through his hair, brushing against the same worn coat he'd worn on every set they'd built since Quiet Hands. He looked out at the horizon. Not for answers, just for breath. Anna joined him moments later, barefoot too, her dress fluttering in the ocean wind. "How does it feel?" she asked softly. "Strange," he said. "I thought I'd feel finished, like I reached something, but all I feel is more beginning." Anna smiled. "That's because stories don't end, they just change shape." He nodded slowly. Maybe, ... Maybe the best ones aren't the ones that leave people cheering. Maybe they're the ones that leave people still. Na looked at him. "You left me still the day you didn't say a word in that boardroom and just walked out with your dignity." He looked at her. "It gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost." She didn't respond with words. She just took his hand. The Wind Never Lies was finished 2 months later, a soft release. Number. Press tour. No big media campaign, just a quiet upload, paired with a message. This is for the ones who walk alone. It's the ones who love and lose and love again. It's the ones who speak in silence. It went viral within hours. Not because of marketing, because people needed it, and when they watched it, something opened inside them. Something they hadn't touched in years. Grief, longing, forgiveness. People cried in subways, in hospital beds, in prison cells, and in one unexpected moment on the floor of a packed high school gym, students watched the film as part of a mental health awareness event. When the lights came on, none of them spoke, not even the teachers, but one teenage boy raised his hand. His voice cracked as he said, "That movie, ... that felt like me." And then he started to cry, and no one laughed, because Keanu and Anna had made crying safe again. Meanwhile, Hollywood scrambled to catch up. Suddenly, studios launched Truth Series. Agents rebranded their actors as raw and honest. But none of it landed the way Quiet Hands and The Wind Never Lies had, because you can't fake soul, you can't package kindness, and you can't replace two people who had walked through failure. not with bitterness, but with open arms one day. Keanu sat in front of a small class at a community center in a forgotten part of town. No cameras, no porters. Just 15 kids sitting on folding chairs. He held up a simple notebook. "This," he said, "is more powerful than any award, 'cause this is where your voice begins." A young girl raised her hand. "But what if nobody listens?" He smiled. "Gently, you write anyway, 'cause your truth isn't waiting for applause. It's waiting to be free." Anna, on the other side of the country, visited a small theater group run by trauma survivors. They asked her why she didn't take more Hollywood roles anymore. She answered, "Because I'm not here to be seen anymore. I'm here to see." The room was silent. Then someone whispered, "Thank you." Years passed, more films were made, some big, some small, some were hits. Some faded quietly, but none of that mattered, because by then, Keanu and Anna had done something no box office number could erase. They changed the language of cinema. They reminded the world that strength could be gentle, that silence could speak, that failure could lead to the most human kind of victory. And then one night, in a quiet studio, lit only by a single lamp, Keanu finished writing something. His hands shook slightly as he closed the final page of a new script. His last one. Anna walked in, barefoot, wrapped in a shawl, her hair tied back. He looked up at her, smiled faintly. "It's done," he said. "What's it called?" she asked. He turned the notebook around. It read. The room went silent. Anna looked at the title for a long moment. "You ready?" she asked. He nodded. "I've said all I needed." She walked over and hugged him tightly, and they stood there for a while. No words, no cameras, no clapping, just the ending of a chapter. The script was never filmed, but it was published. Millions. Read it. And in one of the final scenes, the main character, a man who had once been laughed at, discarded, forgotten, stands on a dim stage. Facing a quiet crowd, he doesn't speak. He simply looks at them, and one by one, every person in the audience begins to cry. Not because they're sad, but because for once they feel understood. And in the final line of the script, it reads, "He never needed to shout to be heard. He just needed someone to listen." That's how they remembered Keanu. Reeves, not as a legend, not as a celebrity, but as the man who made silence feel sacred. And Anna de Armas. They remembered her as the woman who saw him when the world looked away. Together, they reminded us that sometimes the greatest kind of power comes not from noise, but from quiet hands reaching into the dark and gently turning the light back on.